Hi everyone, join me for this dynamic discussion with Cindy Blackburn about AI and the future of teaching. Cindy takes us on her journey from being an elementary educator to her current role at Toddle, where she's deeply involved in harnessing the power of AI to enhance learning experiences in the classroom. Together, we discuss how AI is reshaping teaching practices, streamlining lesson planning, and customizing learning for students. Cindy emphasises the importance of embracing AI tools like ChatGPT to empower educators in creating dynamic lessons and assessments. Plus, we delve into the potential of augmented reality in education and the tech advancements on the horizon. So, grab your favourite drink, settle in, and enjoy the conversation about the transformative impact of AI in education right now. Hi everyone, I'm so excited today. I've got Cindy Blackburn here to talk about her journey as a teacher and into the work that she does now with Toddle, which is a new AI-powered LMS, which is very exciting. And so we're going to be talking about AI and all things education and teaching today. So Cindy, welcome to my channel. Please, let us know a little bit about your journey and how you got to being here right now.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bianca. I feel so lucky. I kind of have the coolest job in the world.
Amazing.
I started as an elementary educator, so I worked in international schools for a decade in PYP schools as both a grade level teacher and as a curriculum coordinator. So grade 1, grade 5,
Nice.
administrator, all over the place. And I just started kind of creating content for my team. So I found that the PYP is such a tricky curriculum when you're first getting into it. So kind of the how-to of how do we plan and what do we even do with those learner profiles and all this new terminology. I was making resources for my teachers, and I always just kind of thought, why not put them online for free? So started going on Twitter, Miss Cindy PYP, and just putting resources online. And a few months into that, this brand new company called Toddle reached out and just said, like, hey, we see that you're putting this stuff out for PYP teachers. PYP is our jam.
Yeah.
What if we started working together to co-create these? So since 2021, I've worked with Toddle in that capacity. Yeah, so just kind of creating cool free things for teachers to use. I never wanted to charge teachers to use them. I was moving back to the States and thinking about, pivoting into a different career, maybe corporate training or something. And the Toddle team was like, absolutely not. You're coming on with us. So for the past 2 years, I've been full-time with them as the director of learning and engagement. So all of our PYP and AI and leadership events and resources, I get to kind of create and work with collaborators and do all of that.
Toddle are truly revolutionising the teaching profession, especially through their use of AI. It is clear that they are dedicated to providing teachers with the necessary tools for delivering modern education. The Toddle platform offers a unified experience, seamlessly integrating long-term curriculum planning, daily instruction, assessments, progress reports, and communication with families. Check them out today.
Wow, you've got the dream job. I would have loved that when I was in teaching. If someone had given me that lifeline out of schools, I would have been like taking it like you've done. Well done.
Thanks. It's
excellent.
Legit fun. And the new podcast, if people want to check it out, School Leaders Project,
Perfect.
it's so fun just to get to talk to great thinkers and great doers in education and make cool stuff.
And so do you get to travel around at the moment, or are you mainly based in the States and do a lot with the US market?
So I do some private consulting on the side with international schools. And then typically with Toddle, we'll do live events with schools once in a while. That's not quite as regular, but lots and lots of virtual events for sure.
Yeah, perfect. And that's how we met at a virtual event just a couple of weeks ago. It's fabulous, yes. So I've been diving into the world of Toddle and it's pretty exciting. But maybe just let's zoom out a little bit to just AI in schools right now. You're sort of in and out of, on the ground with the leaders, talking to the leaders and also in the schools. And so what is your take on how is it actually helping our primary schools, especially because it's your jam? What have you been seeing?
So that's the big thing with elementary is I think there was a misconception early on that because our students can't use AI, it's almost like social media, like Facebook or Instagram. Under 13, they're not allowed to use it in schools, which is a big bummer. And so I think initially elementary teachers were kind of hands off of like, well, it doesn't really apply to me.
Sure.
But where the magic comes in is when teachers begin to utilize it for themselves. Because really teaching, we know, is this high cognitive load job. We're constantly making so many decisions. And in addition to that, they've got to be cute and creative
Yeah, you're acting.
which is,
I said it was always like acting. You go on stage every morning and you put on a show and then you wrap up the day and you do it all again the next day.
and it's exhausting, especially if you're in a school where you're a little bit more progressive, forward thinking, and creating your own curriculum. You're not just handed a script. And
No.
that's often why a lot of us chose those schools, is because we believe in the power of intentional curriculum.
Mhm.
But that isn't to say that every lesson you're going to have like a beautiful creative idea that just sparks. So I think that's been the big aha when I'm in schools, is
Right.
there's first that feeling of kind of like trepidation or like, this doesn't apply to me. And then you introduce kind of the persona, and then you kind of show a couple of tasks, creating an assessment or creating a provocation for a unit. And you see teachers' eyes just kind of go like, like, coolest story was working with a language team. And language is always so hard to collaborate meaningfully on units. And they were kind of like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, how conceptually do we connect here? And I said, well, let's just look on ChatGPT. So you're teaching in Arabic. Let's talk about cultures and homes and see what creative collaboration ideas ChatGPT comes up with. And they were just like, we get it.
Wow.
It's like that training wheel that you need to take your
Mhm.
pedagogy from thinking about it, theorizing about it, to just like doing it.
Doing it. Yeah. And I think, my kind of take is that teachers have been so overwhelmed with technology for the last 20 years. Like when I
Oof.
sat in the classroom, that was when smartboards started. So, that was like the cool thing to do, smartboards.
Yeah.
And even then, people were like, oh, no, 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 my computer is fine. Like, I don't want to deal with this. And so there has
Mm,
been a lot of change, I think, for anyone who's been working in schools now for the last 20 to 30 years. And there's been a lot of pressure from, the top to integrate different things. And I remember, getting to the staff room and seeing just flyer after flyer of technology companies sitting on the, trying to sell you something. So
yeah.
there's a bit of a healthy skepticism, I think, but I love that you're seeing what happens when they can see what it can do. Because I've been going through the same process myself for my role. Like, oh wow, that was a really good answer, ChatGPT.
That was a fairly good answer,
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
yeah, like that's a great idea. Thank you. Right. What about for the learners? I know in elementary it's a bit tricky because we see those kids as sort of our babies, and there's a lot of face-to-face, there's a lot of, interaction. We don't want to put them on screens too much. We don't really want
Mhm.
them sitting in front of a device all day. We want them engaging and learning and socializing. So how is AI sort of supporting the learners' side?
Check out this video Bianca published last year on the somewhat negative impacts of more and more online learning. The very device used to learn is the same one with all the distractions.
It's so important. It's similar to, I think, coding. A lot of the times, the higher level coding things our younger learners can't do, but we can develop that
The
early
thinking,
on.
right? Yeah.
The thinking and understanding how it works. And most importantly, I think the modeling of it. So one of the strategies I really support for teachers is like, your kids are so excited about AI. So pop it up there, especially like as you're starting a new project and the kids, you go, okay, well, what questions do you have about this new maths unit that we're learning? And they just look at you like,
Yeah.
and you're like, who might have a question? Let's see. So get out your handy smartboard, pop ChatGPT up
Yeah.
there, and just ask it. Like, I'm working with a group of grade 5 students. We're working on this math concept. How might this connect to their interests and their real world passions?
Yeah.
And let it pop up and talk together. Is this a valid response? Is this something that's exciting to you? So I think there's so many ways that we can model it, that we can be using it in advance of lessons and showing the product to students and evaluating it together. So even though they're not technically inputting, they're
Yeah.
seeing its use and they're just so jazzed about it. So engagement goes up exponentially the second ChatGPT comes out.
Yeah, right. That's good to know. I think that analogy to coding is really important because it's
Mm,
sort of changing the way we think, because obviously the prompting is now the really key thing. So, Google got us there a little bit when we used to just type questions into Google search,
right.
yeah, I need to find a gift basket, like people would just type full questions into Google, but ChatGPT is taking the prompting idea to a new level. So you have to be really clear about what it is you want from it. Otherwise, you do get spun back some pretty rubbish stuff. And so I think it's a really good way to put it, is that, just embracing that thinking part. So it's great that we're seeing some adoption. And I was really inspired by the Toddle conference the other week. I felt like, yeah, I was really in awe of how advanced lots of leaders are to be in that conversation with you, to be having the conversation that you guys were having, and I'll chuck a link in the description below to that, to the Toddle workshop list, because, you know, to have that conversation, they had to be really embracing what revolution we're in, like the technology that we're in right now. So I think we're in a brand new phase of the technological revolution. I think we're at the same kind of impact. AI is the same impact as the internet had when the internet was formed. So what do you see, though, the biggest challenges right now in the schools and from the leaders that you're talking to?
Well, you might be able to tell I'm a little bit of a glass half full lady, but I think all the challenges that it brings also bring such opportunities. So to me, ChatGPT, the effect it will have, like, you know how during COVID, all of a sudden tech literacy of teachers went up because it had to.
Yeah.
My belief truly is that what COVID did to technology, ChatGPT is going to do to pedagogy.
Right.
That we all have these beliefs about best practices of how children learn. We believe that we should tap into their interests. We believe that assessment shouldn't be one size fits all and there should be opportunity for personalization, right? We want to prepare learners to be able to learn, not just to be able to be successful in a test. We all say that often, but when you step into many classrooms, it's like you go back 20 years and there's call and response and chanting and weird stuff. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is connected to assessments, which are going to have to change. Because if I'm a college student trying to get into college and ChatGPT can write a better essay for me than I can write for myself, of course I'm going to use that tool. And there's going to be no way for the university to know or check that.
No.
So I think this force of change of the assessment methods at the top is going to have such a beautiful trickle down that's going to result in pedagogy that we've been advocating for since the 80s. My hope is that, like, it's going to be scary, it's going to be full of change, but at the end of the day, the learners are who are going to benefit the most from those changes.
I love that you've said that, because when it first came out, obviously I did like the full normal panic, like most people. Yeah.
The world
You know,
ending.
a few days of panic, and then I was like, no, pull yourself together, Bianca. Like, you've done lots of tech before. You love tech. Like, you can do this. And then I totally just flipped my entire mindset around it. And I said, well, actually, we've been talking about the learners, like the gap is getting bigger between the high achievers and the low achievers. And we've talked for years about how we need to close the gap across all of our kind of benchmarks. Well, ChatGPT can close the gap.
Here she is.
And
Here's
also,
the solution.
it's going to be modeling best practice instruction. And direct instruction is the hardest thing to do in a classroom when you've got 30 kids, right? Really pure direct instruction and targeted direct instruction is really difficult. And I also love your point, because when the universities all freaked out and said, let's like plagiarism checkers and we need to shut this down. And I'm like, no. Like, plagiarism isn't your problem. Assessments have been your problem for a very long time, you know? So
Totally.
underperforming, we know that the higher education system is not preparing people for the workforce in the truest way that it should. So this could be, like you said, the opportunity to make that change.
For more thoughts from Bianca on AI and plagiarism, check out this video.
I love Yang Zhao's thinking on this. He says that we should create a rigid profile of student strengths, a rigid profile of student interests. And to me, it's just an incredible tool for doing exactly that. And not only having that data, but being able to meaningfully implement it on a day-to-day practice without it being such an emotional and cognitive burden on our teachers.
Yeah, I mean, this personalized learning push has been extremely taxing on teachers. I mean, how are you supposed to personalize a lesson when you've got 28 to 30 kids in the room? I mean, you've either got to teach the middle or the bottom or the top, and then you've got to adjust, right? You know, without that one-on-one, it's very difficult. Yeah.
So difficult. And there's so many theories and so many best practices out there that to keep them all in your head. That's why a tool like Toddle is so cool, is because if your school is following a certain pedagogy, that pedagogy is baked into the model. So you're not having to keep and memorize these lists of what you're supposed to be doing. It's like your own personal assistant who's like, oh, but remember, you want to teach conceptually. Here's a way to do that.
Yeah, it's like having blooms in your head, right?
Right.
But yeah, so that was a great segue, because I was about to ask you, tell me a little bit more about Toddle, because I've been engaging with them for a couple of months. I've done a demo. I haven't obviously used it because I'm not in the classroom or with teachers at the moment in my job, but it looks amazing. Like I said, my goodness,
So cool.
if you'd given this to me as a teacher, I would have been like, right, maybe I won't leave the profession. I don't think
Toddle
you'll get
already
me
was
back,
cool.
but I might not have left.
Right. Well, so Toddle's already cool. Like it's just a beautiful design. Literally, we're saying there's too many apps. There's too much going on. And they said there has to be a better way. So they created it for their school, demoed it at like a world conference, and everyone was like, we want to buy this. And like, but it's not for sale, it's for us.
Wow.
But the demand for the product was just there. So it started as this way of planning asynchronously that you and your team could collaborate, design units, have your curriculum in one easy to access, beautiful place. And then when AI came out, we had our entire staff of Toddle met. And the head of the company, DePonchu, came on and was like, you need to get with this or get off the team because this is going to be integral to how we move forward.
Okay.
And they've really just like jumped in with both feet. So in my role, for example, I had learning and development. And so I've just past few months just learning everything I can and creating, things for educators to be able to create policies and prompt guides. But beyond that, I get to have a voice in the actual prompt generation itself. So we have a whole back end of prompts that teachers can just select and plan lessons.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool. It's got so much pedagogy just like shoved into every prompt, and the output just blows your mind. And we're finding it's saving our teachers. I think it's 5 hours a week the average user is saving on lesson planning, on parent communications. So all those messages are generated for you. And the coolest one, report card comments are auto-generated using the data from student portfolios. So it's just like, it's just cool.
The only thing I can't do is yard duty. So I don't know what you call it in the States, but the two things I hated most about teaching was yard duty and marking.
Oh, yeah, recess duty.
Yeah, recess duty. I mean, I think that's fabulous. I mean, I remember teaching with notepads, Excel spreadsheets, apps, the school system. I mean, that was, 15, 20 years ago. So it'd be worse now. It would be so much tech.
So much to keep track of.
And it is overwhelming. Every time a new technology comes in, you're like, oh, okay, we need to do the learning curve. So I'm glad to hear that it's solving that problem. And I think it does more than an LMS. It's not an LMS in its purest form. It's an entire system, which is supporting those teachers, which is fabulous. And so since you're a glass half full, the last question I want to end you on is, I mean, you've sort of answered it, but what are you most excited about for the next 2 or 3 years in the education space? And say you stay in the K-12 space and you're waving the flag for Toddle, and what are you most excited about?
Can I have 2 answers?
You could have 2 answers. There's no rules here.
So the first definite one that is definitely coming, I mean, even Toddle, we're working on it now, is like we've talked about differentiation. So using data visual. So I think data visualization, database decision-making is going to be the next easy win for AI, which I just think about that as a teacher. If I had just known, oh, these kids need this help in this math concept, and these kids are ready to advance and fly higher. Oh, just amazing. I think there's going to be so much advancement there in assessment, collecting data, data visualization, grouping and responding. The second area that I haven't seen as much yet, but the development of the Apple glasses makes me cautiously optimistic about augmented reality.
Yeah.
I just think about our learners, especially our learners on the spectrum, our more tactile learners, to have the ability to touch things with their hands and be in places and manipulate objects, I think is going to be transformative. And I can't wait to see the advances in that space.
Wow, that's exciting. I mean, I got on the VR bandwagon a year or so ago to try and look into it, but I just wasn't excited. It looked like
it's not that cool yet.
Great. And then I just didn't even want to put my own headset on. So I was like, well, if I don't want to go and put my headset on, how am I going to?
It makes you nauseous, those weird foamy glasses.
Exactly. And at that stage, I didn't have my LASIK surgery. So I had contacts, and with contact lenses and VR, it's not a nice experience. It just feels weird. Now that I've had LASIK, it's a bit better. But yeah, it was kind of exciting, and I thought it was going to be the next thing. But I think you're right when it comes to augmented reality is a little bit more exciting for me, I think. I don't know why Pokemon was so long ago and nothing else has happened since, but whatever.
I think it will be more elegant. I think it will be more. I wonder if we'll see it first in cars. I'm very, very curious to see that tech, and if it starts in education or if it more trickles into education.
Yeah, I mean, the gamers always seem to know what's going on, so I'm sure it'll be another version of some sort of game. They seem to be ahead.
Another way ladies are behind, I think, like all those dudes have been growing up playing video games.
Gaming.
We gotta get in on the gaming.
I'm just not interested in gaming.
I
But yeah,
know, it makes me
I know a few
nauseous.
times I'm like, I wish because I think gamers have a different mindset. There's something in their mindset that's really lends itself to where tech's going. So I think we can learn a lot from them.
I think their proprioception and I bet their brains are structured slightly differently because they can extend their body into a virtual space, which is going to be a skill set of the future for sure.
Yeah, wow, that's a scary one. Okay, well, we'll come back and talk about that in 6 months' time. We'll see where this goes. But a big thank you, Cindy. I'm sure my wonderful listeners and viewers would have loved this interview. It's been great to hear from somebody who is in there at the school level, talking to leaders, working with an app that is really one of the best AI-powered things I've seen on the market. So I'm very excited to keep my relationship with Toddle and see how we go and dive in more and see what I can do to help.
Really, really such a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks, Cindy. And until next time, stay awesome.